Afternoon. I'm Blair Pippin with Florida Abolitionists, here again with our founder and CEO, Tomas. We're so thankful to have you watching this Abolitionist Live video today, and we hope you were able to catch last week's video. If not, just scroll down our Facebook feed and check it out. It's just a few minutes where we shared about how Tomas first learned about human trafficking. And as I thought about that a little bit more, Tomas, over the week of how you were in Washington, D.C., you heard about human trafficking, you were just hit with the reality, you got to do something. And then you came back to Florida, and I know you shared a little bit last time, but what did you do?
So, one of the things is that we find people every day that may just learn about the issue. Maybe they first come to one of our trainings or see something on TV. And I think, Blair, what is important is that at that point, I didn't know anything about human trafficking. I just knew it was occurring. I knew that there was modern day slavery, unfortunately, happening. And so one of the things I said, we need to learn more about it. So I did my homework. I found the folks in Florida that already had one of the first cases. And we came together and did a training there in Melbourne, in Florida. And so that was the beginning to really understand what is human trafficking. And I think that's the first step.
Yeah, that's great. And so for those of you watching and your friends, you may just now be learning about human trafficking, but that doesn't mean that you can't go ahead and do something. And so these Abolitionist Live videos, what we want to do with them is to give you that education that you need so that you can do more and you can get involved. You can share with your friends, you can share with businesses and jump in and help stop human trafficking. And so we want to really start with the foundation today and talk about what is human trafficking. So Tomas, could you explain what is human trafficking?
Sure. So, not to get into the all the different laws, but just kind of a snapshot of what is legally out there is, first of all, you have the international law, which is called the Palermo Protocol, which was passed by the United Nations in 2000. Our federal law is called the Trafficking Victims Reauthorization Protection Act, which is reauthorized every 3 or 4 years, and that's our federal law against human trafficking. Then there's the state statute of Florida, which is 787.06, which also defines human trafficking. And some of the key words in that is there force, fraud, or coercion. And that distinguishes it from other crimes that a lot of times people get maybe thinking it's human smuggling, maybe they think it's domestic violence, sexual assault, even child abuse. And all those different abuses and crimes have their own laws and statutes, but the key thing with human trafficking is there's force, fraud, and coercion. And the way that we like to tell our friends and our partners to identify it in layman's term is anytime somebody is commercially exploited against their will for someone else's profit, so any individual. And that helps them understand that somebody is getting something monetarily or some kind of exchange for another person.
So they're using them to make money off of them, essentially, without paying them back or whatever it would be.
Yes, that's human sex and labor trafficking.
Right, because it could be either. Tomas, could you give us an example? I know you've worked with countless victims.
Yes.
Is there one that you could kind of tell us about to help us wrap our minds around what this really looks like?
Sure, and one of the stories of many, and we always use fictitious names with the actual story so that we never would like anyone to identify who the victim is. We believe strongly in confidentiality. Some of them still have open cases. Sometimes the trafficker, the pimp are still looking for them. And so we're going to call this girl Emily, that she was online, and she began to connect with different people through social apps. And she ended up being basically, long story short, recruited by this guy who said that he was interested in her. They started talking. They started even doing FaceTime and stuff like that. So she's thought he was legit, and so he had asked her on a date, and really kind of did the whole romantic thing, and that is part of the grooming, by the way. Really treated her well, and they got into a relationship. She really cared for him. She was really looking for that special person, And that's what we see with a lot of these young people, is that everyone is looking for love and acceptance. And that's something that it's God-given, that void in each human being. And so it's easy a lot of times to connect because everyone is looking for that, right? And so this happened to her. Long story short again, is she ended up being introduced to some of his friends, and they were actually involved also with drug trafficking. And so a lot of times the drug traffickers are also doing the human trafficking as well. She ended up having to, he convinced her to go on dates, which was really having sex with strangers for money. And the thing about it is that she didn't get to keep any of the money. Wasn't like what we traditionally think of prostitution or escorting, but she was forced then to continue to do that. He really had her psychologically brainwashed. And many times people say, why don't they run? Why don't they tell the authorities? Why don't they tell their parents? Well, the psychology of this type of abuse and trauma, that person ends up getting what's we refer to as the Stockholm Syndrome. And so there's a false loyalty to that trafficker, that pimp.
Yeah, so I mean, as you can see, there's a lot of things that go into the situation, all the manipulation and even how Emily ended up getting sucked into it. And so in future episodes, we're going to talk more about grooming and the ways that traffickers groom their victims, and we're going to talk about the trauma and the healing journey that our victims and survivors go through after they're recovered. And so we'll get into more of that now. We really want to give you bite-sized nuggets of things that you can take and educate yourself, but also educate your friends and family. So now we got a picture about what this looks like, but how big of a problem is this, Tomas?
So that's a great question, Blair. The problem is extensive, and we really don't know. I mean, there's no central database in the United States or in the state of Florida of what the problem looks like. And so all we do know is based on the reports that are being reported. And so I'll explain that. According to for example, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they are estimating there's at least 100,000 minors that are recruited into the sex trafficking based on the missing kids that we hear about every day, unfortunately, in this country, and those that are maybe abducted, taken, and mostly lured in these runaways. That's the case. So they're saying about 100,000. Globally, according to the International Labor Organization, they have a conservative estimate of 20.9 million. And you're going to hear stats where it goes up to even 40 million now by some of the research that's being done. But what I always say is that one slave is too many, and so we need to do something about it, regardless of what the real number is. The third thing is that Florida is unfortunately the third highest in calls to the National Human Trafficking Hotline through Polaris Project. And so we know that we're the number 3 state. Orlando was just reported last fall, per capita is the number 3 city. And so according to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, again, there's Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Orlando, Miami, and Las Vegas. And that's, again, per capita. I believe they base that on per 100,000 people, 265 calls. And so we are, unfortunately, for the size of our city, seeing this. But in one way, Blair, it's kind of good. Our people care, and they're reporting. Again, we only know this is what's based on what's reporting, not actual. And so, but again, one slave is too many.
Right. So, Tomas, what is the hotline? If somebody sees something that they think is suspicious, they can make an anonymous phone call to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Yes. What is that number? So
we're partnered with the hotline through the Polaris Project. The number is 888-37-37888. Again, 888-37-37888. It's 24/7. There's also different languages that they can connect a person to interpret. So please call if you see anything, if you suspect something. Remember, it's better to say something than not say it if you see it. And so please report. And again, in Central Florida, for the adults that we get many of the calls, other agencies do as well, but they are routed to us. And we would love to answer your questions and or hopefully see somebody's life saved and a victim free from this atrocity.
Yes, thanks, Tomas, and thank you for joining us today. We really, really appreciate your time. And we just want to encourage you, please follow us on social media. Continue to follow us in our Abolitionists Live videos. We're going to keep these coming your way so that you can get more education and learn more about human trafficking so that you can help stop it. So thanks so much for your time today, and we'll see you soon.